Hello, this is Basar. In this tutorial, we will practice Spring Security method level authorization. Previously, we have practiced this one in one of my previous tutorials. You can find that the role-based authentication tutorial. We were using this pre-authorize right here to set the method level authorization. And now we are going to practice this one with more complicated scenarios. Let's see the example first. So we have users in our application, user 1, user 2, and the admin. And we have this endpoint for updating this user. We will be sending this put request to the user's ID. And in the request, we will be updating this user display name. Currently, the display name for all users are null. And this is user 1. This is the user 1 ID. And I'm going to send the update request for this user 1. And I'm going to send my request with user 1 credentials. So here, if I update like this, let's say the display name will be updated by user 1. Sending it. And here we can see the display name is updated like this. And if I run the query once again, here I can see user 1's display name is updated. But if I try to update user 2 from this user 1, let's see what's going to happen. And here we are receiving this 403. So we are not allowing the user to be updating another user's display name. We also have one more limitation right here. Again, let's try to update user 1. Let's say updated by user 1 again. Again, sending the request with the user 1 credentials. Let's try it. This one is also failing because we have another field here. Let's show all the fields. So we have this last updated column in the user table, and we have a limitation like a user can change their display name only once in every 24 hours. So that's why we are rejecting the second update request. But if we try to update this with user of admin, and this admin has the admin role, so let's change this one. Updated by admin. So admin can update this user display name. So we have this authorization logic where we will be limiting this update operation to the user specific to this ID. So the logged in user and this ID, the user to be updated must be same. And also a user can only update once, and admin can update any user's display name. So that's what we are going to implement here. Again, you can find the codes here in this GitHub repository. This was part of my Spring Security tutorials, and we started with the SPCrypt, then we do this security basics. Then on top of that one, we have this role-based security. Then we made this logged in user, and this is the one, this method level authorization, which is the current tutorial. So I'm going to do my implementation on top of this logged in user tag. So I already cloned this repository. I have this code opened in VS Code right here. First, I'm going to switch to the tag, this logged in user, and now we can do the implementation. Again, let's go over the project. We have this POM.xml, the Spring Boot version is this one, 2.4. We have this Java version 11. We have the Spring Data JPA, Spring Security, Web, and also we have the DevTools, and we have H2 a database, Lombok, and the test dependencies. Now let's start with this one. We will start our application. So the application is running. Let's start with the first thing. Currently, the user does not have the display name. We are going to update user's display name. We are not going to update these fields, username, email, or the password. We will just provide option to our users to change their display name. So adding this field, and let's have controller method right here. So far we have this post mapping which was creating user, but now we are going to add another endpoint, and this is for updating the entity. So it is going to be put mapping, and the endpoint path will be API 10 users, but we need the identifier of the user. So this is going to be coming for user 1, user 2, user 3. So after the users part, we will receive the user ID. This is a dynamic value, so we add the dynamic values in curly braces in the mapping strings, and here we are going to return a user object back. Let's say we will do that like this, and this method will be update a user, and we are going to get the request body. This body will be containing the display name, this updated display name. Let's say we will be receiving this user object. We can set different object for this one. We can have our user update DTO object, and we can use that one here, but user object is also fine. And the next value is this ID, and we can get it by using pet variable annotation, and this is the field we are looking for. It is ID, and the ID of the user is, let's check it here, it is long. So we are expecting this pet variable to be long ID, and then we are going to delegate this operation again to our user service. So this user service will be updating the user object, and it's going to be returning back to updated user object to us. So we are going to return that user as a response to our client request. So we will be calling this user service, and let's say we will have an update user method, and let's pass the parameters ID and user to it. So let's create this method. This does not exist yet. So here in user service, we have this method right here. Now, first thing is we need to get the user in database. So we will query it, user repository, and we can use the get one method coming with the user repository, and we pass the ID to it. And as a result, we are expecting to get the user in database. And then we can set this user in database's display name to the value we are receiving in this user object. This is coming with the request body, and we are taking that request object's display name and setting it to our actual database entries display name. And then we will save it. And this save operation is returning the updated object back. So we will call this user repository save, and we will pass this in DB. And this is returning back the user object. So we are returning it back, and here it is returning back as a response. Now let's save all these changes. So let's try with the postman. Now we have this users, and let's try to update with like this. Let's say update it. Let's say it's going to be 1. So this is updated, but let's go without authentication. So let's try without authentication, and let's change this to 2. And here we see we are able to update the user. We can update the user too. So we are freely update any user's display name. We don't need to pass the authentication at this point. So this is not something we want in our actual application, we want to control who is allowed to update user data. So first thing we can do is, let's go to our configuration. In security configuration, just like adding any secure endpoint, we can say we want this requests coming with this HTTP method put to the endpoint of API 10 users and this dynamic ID. So we want this request to be authenticated. So we would be eliminating the request without authorization to be rejected. So let's save this one. And going back to Postman, again, sending the request without authentication. And now we are receiving this 401. Let's try this one now. So this ID 2 belongs to the user 2. And if I try to update this with the, let's go with the user 1. And let's say updated by user 1. And here we are receiving 200 OK, and this user 2 display name is updated. Again, this is not something we want to go with. So what we can do is, let's go over the solutions. The first thing we can do is, in the previous tutorials here, we can see that we have this functionality right here. We are able to access to the logged in user by using this annotation, and the app user is right here. This is having the user object in it, and we were creating this instance here in the user details service. So we were creating this app user and we were adding the actual user object in it. So we can use this functionality. So here we can, right here, we can ask Spring to inject us the logged in user, and this is going to be app user. Let's import that one. And we can do this control. We can say if this app user has the user object, the actual user object, and we can get that user's ID. And if this ID does not equal to the ID we are getting in this URL, then this means this logged in user is trying to update another user. So let's return an error right here. So we are going to return a different response with the different status. So instead of returning this user object, let's change it to response entity. This is a generic class, and for the actual type we will have different objects, so that's why I'm using question mark right here. So this is the error case in this if block. If the IDs are not matching, then we are going to return a response entity, and the status will be HTTP status forbidden. So we are saying that you are not allowed to do this. And again, we can add the body, we can pass an object, or we can type any text like this: you are not allowed to update this user. And now, since we are returning this response entity, let's wrap this one. This update user part will be like this. We will be returning a response entity, and we will be sending a 200 OK, and we can pass the OK body like this. So this user service will be returning the user object, and we will be adding that user object to our response entity, and the status will be 200 OK. Now let's save this. And let's go back to Postman. Again, we are trying to update the user 2. Let's change the display name like this, updated by user 1 again. we expect this one to fail because we are trying to update the user2 with the user1. So let's see what's going to happen. And here we are receiving this 403 forbidden and the message we just set. But if we go like this, if we try to update user2 with the logged in user of user2, let's say updated by user2, then the update operation is successful. So with this way, we are able to check the authorization right here. But just like we did here in the main class, we have this pre-authorize. We can do that check in the pre-authorize part. So let's do that. So adding a pre-authorize right here. And in this pre-authorize, we are using the Spring expression language. And basically, we are checking if this app user, the user object in the app user's ID, is equal to this ID or not. And we can do the same thing here by accessing to these variables. So we have this ID, we have this app user, and we can access to these variables in the Spring expression language by this hash sign. And we can get the ID, and then we can use the expressions, the equality, not equality, the AND operation or operation. We can do those kind of things here. So we are checking if this ID is equal to this app user, this parameter. This has the user object. We were calling this app users get user method, but here we can do it like this. We can direct access to the field of the object. So we are basically pointing to this user object. And then we will get the ID of it, which means we will get the ID like this, dot ID. So just removing this part. So this is a Boolean operation. This is a true-false result. If this is true, which means if the app user ID equals to the ID we are receiving here, then this authorization is successful, which means the current logged in user is allowed to do this operation. Otherwise, if this expression is false, the Spring Security will be returning back the 403 response back. So we no longer need to build our response entity right here. We can just revert it back to the user. We don't need to do any control right here, and just changing this part back to the original, just formatting the code like this. Let's try this one, saving it. Again, going back to Postman. So this is user2, and let's try to update with user1. Updated by user1, and now we are receiving this 403, and we have this huge trace, and this is triggered by the Spring Security access denied exception. In this Spring expression language, there are keywords. In the logged in user tutorial, I have shown the principal object and how we are able to map that principal to our app user object. Now we can do like this. We can just replace this one with principal. For this one, I'm not using the hash sign. This is a special keyword. Principal is the representation of the user details object. We are loading right here. So this object right here, and this object is our implementation, and we know that this principal is actually this app user, and it has this user in it, and that user has the ID in it. So we can replace this part. We no longer need to inject the logged in user to our method here. So instead of going like this, we can use the principal right here and compare the ID with the ID we are receiving in the path. So let's save this one again. And let's try it again. Again, the scenario is working as expected with this implementation. Now let's have a bit complex control logic here. So far we are just checking the ID, the parameter we are receiving here with the logged in user's ID, and we are able to access them easily like this. But let's have a bit complicated logic. Let's say we will just allow user to update their display name once in every 24 hours. First, let's add a field to our object. We will have a local date time, and let's say this is last updated, importing that one, and let's update our user service. As soon as we update the user, let's set the in DB set last updated to local date time now. So with this way, we will be storing the last updated time of our user. Now we need to control two things here. The first thing is to compare this ID, and the other one is the last updated time of this target user's object. For that, we will have a method doing multiple things in it. So let's implement that method right here. Let's create a new class. Let's call this one as user authorization service. And we will have a method here which will be returning true false. So let's implement here. It's returning boolean, and let's say the method name is can update. And let's add the annotation service. We will use this method right here inside this Spring expression. So we need these parameters, this ID, the path variable ID, and the logged in user ID. This method will be taking, let's say, it's going to be taking logged in user ID, and it's also be taking the path user ID. So first thing is we will check if logged in user ID is not equal to path user ID. We will be returning false. And the next logic is if this is passing, now we can check the actual user object and see the last updated date of it. So we need to have the user repository here because we are going to query this user. We can inject it like this, and let's get the user. We will run user repository find by ID. This is a built-in function and it is returning optional. So let's pass the path user ID. This is the user being updated, and let's assign it to a variable here. This is going to be user, and let's say optional user. And if optional user is not present, then we are going to return false here. So maybe we are trying to update an non-existing user. This is not an allowed behavior, so we will be returning forbidden in this case too. And if there is a user, so we will have the user, let's say this is in DB, and we will get it from optional user get. So we have the user object. Now it is time to check the last updated time. So first let's have a variable right here, local date time of, let's say, 24 hours ago. And this is the local date time now minus hours, 24 hours. So this is the 24 hours ago. And if in db get last updated, we just added this field. So this field can be null. There is a possibility of that field to be null. If that is null, that's fine. We can update this user. But if it is not null, we will check if that last updated value is after the 24 hours ago. If that's the case, we will be returning false because we are not allowing users to update display name if it is updated within 24 hours. Otherwise, we have no control left here. We will be returning true. After these controls, we will be saying, go ahead, this is an authorized request. So in this user controller, we will be able to process the request. But first, we need to call this method. So the method name is this one, and the class is right here. So in Spring expression language, we can call, this is a service, this is a Spring bean. We can call a bean method like this. Just clearing this part. With @ the class name will be camel case. So it is going to be like this, user authorization service. So the first letter is a lowercase, but the remaining part is same. So the user authorization services, the method name is this one, can update, and we will pass two parameters, logged in user ID and path user ID. So the logged in user ID is principal user ID, and the path user ID is this ID we are having right here, and we can get it like this. So we are calling this beans, this method, with these parameters. So let's fix the typo here, principal user ID and this ID. Now saving all these changes. Again, going back to Postman. So let's do it like this. So this is user2 and sending request with user2. Let's say dated by user2. And here we are able to update this user2 display name with this user2 right here. And if we try to update this once again, here we are receiving this 403 forbidden because of our limitation. So these controls are kicking in, and right here we are returning false, and that is resulting this 403 response. In this pre-authorize, we are able to add the and or operations. So like here in this part, we have this endpoint, and we are telling that this is only allowed if the user has the role of admin. So let's add this admin privilege to this endpoint too. So this can update, or we can say has role of this role admin. So we can have this logical operations right here. So this would be returning true false, and also this will be returning true false, and the combination of both with this or operation is also returning true false. So that's how we can do multiple controls right here. And let's try this one, saving it. So with this implementation, the admin would be able to update the user anytime they want. But if user tries to update the user, then they are limited to update only once in 24 hours. So if I try right here, so this is failing because it is updated a couple of minutes ago. And if I go with admin, and let's change this one to updated by admin, and here we can see it is updated. And if I do like this, changing it, and I'm able to update as much as I want with the admin user. So that's how we can use the pre-authorize with the Spring expression language to set the method level authorization in Spring Boot. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next tutorials.